When our planet was very young, Earth didn't look like the way we know it today. There were no tall buildings or noisy traffic, not even any asphalt roads. Back then, there were dense primeval forests that stretched as far as one could see. The trees were so tall and thick that they blocked out the sun. Fast rivers flowed through the woods. Their waters were crystal clear. Some of them have remained almost unchanged until now. In the distance, one could see huge mountains whose peaks seemed to touch the sky. At that time, these mountains were home to all kinds of large animals. Some of them lived in the forests, while others preferred the grassy plains. Back then, there were no people around. Only wild animals roamed the lands. The age of mankind hadn't begun yet. It would be many millions of years before the first human appeared on the planet. Long before this happened, the Earth went through many changes. Entire species of plants and animals died out. Volcanic eruptions and earthquakes reshaped the face of the planet. The climate changed several times, but despite all the cataclysms, life still existed. Over time, the Earth began to resemble its current form. The continents took their places, and the oceans filled with water. Large mammals returned to the planet: wild boars, bears, wolves, deer, bison, horses, and other animals. Of course, there were also predators among them: big cats, hyenas, and wily foxes. One day, one of the animal groups noticed that the berries in the forest were disappearing. Soon, the animals realized who was behind this. Primitive people appeared in the forest. These were the first apes who stood upright on two legs. Our distant ancestors were tiny in size. They barely reached 140 centimeters in height. Moreover, they were terribly shy and timid, constantly hiding from dangerous predators. They moved around in small clans of 10 to 20 individuals. The apes didn't have any weapons and couldn't protect themselves from animals. They were forced to flee when they heard the roar of a hungry predator. Also, primitive people were weak because they didn't know how to properly feed themselves. Sometimes they ate rotten fruits, drank stagnant water, and caught insects. Because of this, they often got sick. In short, those people were fragile and afraid of everything. At that time, the Earth was still a wild and dangerous place. But our ancestors knew how to find berries and fruits in the forest, which saved them from starvation. Life was still pretty tough, but people managed to survive. They shared their food with each other, sheltered each other from rain and wind, and protected each other from wild animals, at least a little. Years passed, and over time, early humans learned to use the gifts that nature provided them with. Sharp stones helped them cut wood and deal with prey. Sticks were useful for stirring the broth during cooking and as a battering ram against the fence of a hut. Gradually, people learned to use fire, and this turned out to be a real breakthrough. People tamed fire and learned to cook food, scare away animals, and keep warm in cold weather. From the moment this discovery was made, life on Earth changed dramatically. More and more new people were born. The population grew rapidly, and soon the first settlements appeared in the forests. This was a giant leap forward. But the earth was still wild and full of dangers. Many things could threaten people's lives. A person could fall victim to a predator or die from an illness. Any trip outside the settlement was fraught with danger. If a person wasn't careful, he could become someone's dinner. That's why people were afraid to leave their homes, and no one knows what they would have done if they hadn't learned how to protect themselves. Luckily, people quickly figured out how to make simple weapons out of stones and wood. They used spears to hunt and scare off predators. After some time, people made shelters, real huts instead of caves. These dwellings were much more comfortable and could protect their inhabitants from most predators. But don't think that because of this, life got better. The earth was still full of dangers, and the life expectancy of a person was only about 30 years. By that time, various animals had already adapted to living next to humans, but they still posed a serious threat to people's lives. For example, huge woolly mammoths grazed in the open fields. These giants often destroyed human dwellings, looking for succulent plants inside them. Mammoth herds moved across the planet, destroying everything in their path. It was dangerous to meet these giants face to face. People tried to fight back, but even a spear was useless against the thick skin of a mammoth. As you might have guessed, people had to learn how to hunt these monsters to get warm fur and nutritious meat. Hunting such prey required a lot of effort. People had to work together and choose the right moment to attack. This required strategy, stamina, and strength, but people managed to do it. Not only mammoths attacked humans, saber-toothed predators also hunted people. These terrible animals were larger than modern tigers and lions. Their teeth were as long as daggers, and they could easily tear a person apart. Saber-toothed cats often attacked people because they smelled the fat and meat on them. The battle between humans and these predators was fierce. After all, people had weapons and brains, while the saber-toothed cats had claws and teeth. So who would win? If a saber-toothed cat manages to get close to its prey, it could literally rip a person to shreds in a matter of seconds. It's hard to say whether people had any chance against such opponents. Perhaps they could hope for help from their relatives or try to scare off the beast with a spear. But if the predator is hungry enough, none of that will help. A saber-toothed cat is strong enough to crush a person's bones and drink his blood. But despite this, people managed to defeat them. Humans had another powerful enemy: giant eagles. They lived in the mountainous regions of the earth. These birds of prey could easily reach a wingspan of 7 meters. Their beaks were hooked like scythes, and their talons were like iron clamps. Giant eagles nested high in the mountains where no predator could get them. People couldn't do anything about these birds either. After all, they could pick up a person in their talons and carry him to their nest. There were cases where giant eagles attacked people and carried them away. Most likely, the birds mistook humans for prey. Even the thickest leather armor wouldn't save a person from being torn apart by sharp eagle talons. Maybe only a magic wand could help here. But unfortunately, there were no sorcerers back then. People had to come up with another way to deal with such threats. They crafted bows and arrows and used slingshots. These weapons were lightweight and easy to use. Besides, people could shoot without exposing themselves to direct danger. This innovation allowed people to defend themselves against enemies that were stronger than they were. But despite the fact that people learned to deal with predators, they still had problems. For example, once a person accidentally killed another person, this could have happened during a hunt or because of a woman. There weren't any cops to call in such cases, so people had to settle such issues themselves. Conflicts sometimes led to large-scale wars. In such battles, everyone could take part: men, women, and even children. Yes, even kids, because back then, childhood lasted until about the age of 12. By that age, a child was considered an adult and could handle any weapon. Wars between tribes were frequent and could go on for months. People fought until one side was completely wiped out. To prevent such conflicts, people eventually created the first unions, uniting small tribes into large ones. After that, they established rules that prohibited killing each other. Such unions were ruled by leaders who were respected by all members of the community. People elected these leaders based on their strength, intelligence, and courage. Sometimes a leader could rule over hundreds of people. Under their guidance, people built real cities, although they still had to be afraid of wild animals. Many millions of years have passed since then. Today, we can't even imagine how people managed to survive back then, but we know for sure that they did it thanks to their intelligence, courage, and stamina. The earth was still wild back then. Nature hadn't lost its frightening and dangerous character, but people managed to tame it. They domesticated animals, grew plants, and created shelters. Finally, they learned to live in harmony with nature and eventually became its undisputed masters. Thanks to their ingenuity, people survived and left offspring. Otherwise, we simply wouldn't exist today.